praise to Allah. There is no God but Allah. Allah is great.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we are continuing with our series, True Peace, the Secret of Life. And we've been looking at the series over the last few weeks at the most sustainable religion or belief system in the world being Islam, and how it is the message for the whole of the universe. How Islam, being the fastest growing religion in the world, actually has a system in place that is sustainable. Many belief systems in the world are not sustainable. In other words, after a few years they just fall apart. I mean, we've seen some of the so-called gods of this earth. I mean, their religions have disappeared. There's nothing left of them anymore. They've ceased to be. But Islam is one of those religions that is sustainable. In fact, anything that is sustainable means that it not only stays constant, but actually grows, increases. And this is what we find happening in Islam today. Islam is made up of many facets and from many different tiers. And so we find that Islam is not just a single two-dimensional religion. It is a three-dimensional religion that contains many different structures that hold it together and hold it in place. The Islamic framework consists of many things, as we've seen already over the last few weeks. There's the hope structure, or the sure hope structure that we have in believing in Islam. We have an educational structure, we have a spiritual structure. We looked at the morals of Islam and how it deals with day-to-day living. We've looked at human responsibility and the structure of human rights in Islam. We've looked at the family structure and the importance of getting that right so that everything else will fall into place. And we started last time looking at the social structure within Islam. The social structure being that which holds us accountable to Allah for the community in which we live in. And the social structure is very, very important. We said that a social structure works well when you've got everything else right first. We spoke about how you need to lay a foundation. And your basic foundation means that you have to dig out all the old things that you might have believed in before. Perhaps even as a Muslim, to have a proper structure, you've had to dig out all the nonsense that you believed that was not part of Islam. Maybe the additions that you've added into Islam that are nowhere to be found in any of the traditions of Islam. And so this is what we spoke about last week, actually taking out, clearing out all those misconceptions, all those mistruths that have been put into Islam. Now, we find that the human Muslim society is under a great amount of attack. It's under attack from everywhere, not from America, and not from drones, and not from the illegitimate state of Israel. What we find is that Islam is under attack by many other things. But the greater attacks come from our own secular society, by secularism, by our own desires and our own whims, which we follow more and actually are destroying us more than any of those that I mentioned before. We have today in our society people who follow any whims except those things that Allah has ordained. We find that in societies today, and in our social societies and our social bonds, that we would much prefer to be around non-Muslims than we would around Muslims. Often I hear people saying, well, I would rather do business with a non-Muslim, or I'd rather work for a non-Muslim, or I'd rather be married to a non-Muslim, or I'd rather have a non-Muslim neighbor. What a bad situation that we in the world have today where people would say things like that. You know who's saying that? It's not the non-Muslims that are saying that, it's the Muslims that are making all those statements. That's because we have a breakdown in our social systems within Islam. And to restore that social system within Islam means that we're going to do some serious work, or have to do some serious work. And the way to do this work is to realize that we have to have a look at what Islam really teaches and what we have been adding in that actually doesn't belong there. Some of you remember a couple of years ago that I did a talk on Peace TV about a watch and how everything that is inside this watch has little pieces that work together perfectly. If we take this watch and we do not service it once a year, and we do not look after this watch once a year and make sure that it goes to a proper specialist who knows what he's doing, it will break down. It'll start to lose time, the second hand won't work properly, The date calendar won't work properly. In fact, it'll start corroding and it'll get very dirty and grubby and will not look like something you'd want to put on your arm. But if you maintain it properly and you send it in every year to be maintained properly and looked after properly, in fact, even when they decide to change pieces or parts of this watch, what you'll find happening is that it'll all start to work together properly. Maybe they'll take some of those parts out here and put the genuine parts in. It's no use having a watch by a certain make and then having parts in from another make. It'll never work properly. The same make watch has to have that part ordered. There'll be a little serial number on that part, and they'll order it and they'll put it in there. And then it'll work exactly the way it was designed to work. But if we put other parts in, it will never work properly. In fact, it'll probably break down. And I think I used the analogy like if you put a sewing machine part into your watch, it's neither a watch nor a sewing machine. It's just nothing. And so it's the same thing with our social being in Islam. Our social responsibility is to make sure that we are having the right parts put into our social development as Muslims, to go forward as Muslims, to have a good social structure, to have good social responsibility, that our Muslim organizations are running properly. The saddest thing is when we see Muslim organizations doing fundraising for certain groups, and we see this unfortunately in the city where I live in South Africa, is that many people will raise money for their Muslim organization and they'll say they have a zakat fund and a lila fund and they have a dawah fund and have a this fund. But actually have a look at it, it's all the same account. So how are they able to know where that money is supposed to go or where that money is supposed to be distributed? Many of these big groups like this are not looking after, their social responsibilities have fallen down. They no longer care about humanity. They no longer care about the community. All they care about is big fat salaries. And we have to make sure that we get rid of these things from our society, that we make sure that we get proper Islamic organizations that are actually going to be accountable to the community, that are going to handle their finances correctly. One of the saddest things for us is to see is when well-known organizations like that start to spend money in things that are not halal, when they start making haram investments with the money that you sent to them. It's one of the wonderful things about Peace TV and the Islamic Research Foundation. And it's one of the reasons that I do work for certain Muslim organizations like Peace TV and the Islamic Research Foundation, because I did my research, I did my homework. There are other Muslim organizations, other Muslim television stations, radio stations that have asked me to do work for them, and I've said no, simply because I know how their structure works, on how are they spending their money, what accounts they have, and things like that. You as an individual have to do that. It is your social responsibility to find out what type of accounts they hold, where that money is distributed. And then we can start fixing up our society. Then we can start seeing that Islam will work better. Even in the secular world, you find that they have a separate account for each thing. So we have to make sure that we do that right. But I'm moving on to an area that we'll be dealing with later in the series. We'll be dealing with economic issues. But we find in our society today there seems to be a breakdown and people wanting to follow a new world order. You know, I have a brother who is in South Africa. His name is Mullah Rafiq, and he has a website that exposes the new world order and all the dangers that are going on in the world today with the new world order. But you know what, sometimes we as Muslims have our own new world order, not the one that he deals with, but a different one. And we think that we don't have to be obedient to what Allah tells us to do. We think you can rewrite the commands of Allah. We can reinterpret what Allah is saying. We can redecide what we are going to do with our sexuality. We're going to redecide what we're going to do with the way we deal with finances. We're going to redecide on what we're going to do with politics and how we're going to serve Allah. We redecide how we're going to pray. And so we start to reinterpret in our own broken down form of understanding all those things that Allah has given us, and we come up with our own new world order. Yes, we're still obeying some of the laws of Allah, and we're still following them, but we've reinterpreted them. And so instead of praying 5 times a day, we say, well, let's just pray twice a day, or 3 times a day, or as you like. You don't have to pray 5 times. You have some people saying, let's just open mosques for people who are not heterosexual, so that they can come to mosque as well. And we find that breakdown in that area. We find people saying, you know, the political system, you know, let's just reinterpret it. You know, we don't need to live under this Sharia in Muslim country. Let's get rid of it. let's adopt democracy or socialism or communism or whatever ism or whatever humanist view that you might want to add into your political system. That will really work. We've seen how well that has worked in the world. And so what we find is there's a breakdown in Muslims in our own New World Order that we are trying to bring into Islam. We need to get rid of the New World Order and go back to the Old World Order, the one that actually succeeded, the ones that work, the one that we see an economic system growing, the one that we see a political system staying stable. Let me explain this to you. I am not saying that we need to go back to what it was before when we look what's happening in Iran, what happened in Iraq, and places like that where you have these dictators that are doing what they want to do. No, that's what I'm saying. But if we go back to the old world order, the one that actually really lives by the systems that are governed by the Sharia, those people who cry out to Allah, that you see them in the front row, those political leaders that actually got to the front row of the mosque and didn't walk in with purple robes on and gold rings on their fingers and act like they owned the place. Those people who actually submitted to Allah. That's what we need to go back to, the political system, the system that worked. And so we have to be very cautious of this new globalization that we are living as, one world government, one global village. There can be dangers in that. And so we have to be careful as Muslims that we are staying away from this new world order and go back to the old world order. Sometimes we have these television programs like The Bold and the Beautiful, Loving, Days of Our Lives, all these other crazy nonsense soap operas that people watch. And we get affected by that. We see sets and we believe they're real. I mean, I'm here in India and I've walked around some of the sets and I've looked at them and I've seen, I was one which was the general hospital scene. I saw another one which was a jail. And these are just sets, they're not real. They're not really real. Somebody asked me the other day, is this really where you live? And I said, no, this is just a set. So we need to take a break. When we get back from the break, we'll talk a little bit more about what I was talking about now, inshallah.
All praise to Allah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh. And welcome back. We're continuing with our series, and we just had a break. And before the break, we said that, there are social systems that we need to have in place in Islam, and there's a breakdown in these social systems. People want to go towards the new world order, and we are saying perhaps we should stick with the old world order. At least it was reliable. At least it was trustworthy. At least it's built on the proper foundations of Islam. And I said that I'm sitting in a set here. And a lot of people have an idea that the world is just a set. It's artificial. And we are choosing, many of us, to live on a set. We need not live in a set. This is not real. This is not really my house. This is just a set. Somebody asked me once, said, sure, you've got a nice house. I've seen the different rooms in your house on Peace TV. This is a set. And so it is when we watch soap operas and all these other nonsense on TV. It's not real. It's made up. When somebody dies in the real world, it's very gory. It's not Hollywood style where they fall back in slow motion and slide across the floor and it's all romanticized and there's not nice music playing. People die for real. It's a sad, sad world we live in. And we have a social responsibility as Muslims to make this a better world for everybody. Shaitan, he is putting us under his microscope. And he's looking for everything and every way he can affect and destroy our social environment. We have a social structure in Islam, and this is the thing that he wants to destroy. If he can keep you divided, as long as he can keep you all away from each other, he is excited and happy to do that. And so what you will find is he will start to divide people, and he'll start to separate them. And people will run down each other instead of trying to work with each other. But let me make something clear. We can, as Muslims, all work together as long as we all have the same tawheed, as long as we all understand who Allah is, as long as we all understand the same prophet, that last messenger, not any others that have been added on, that we all understand that the Quran has to be accepted along with the Sunnah, that we all understand that you have to pray 5 times a day, then we can work with each other. As long as our Aqidah is the same, then we can work with each other. But, unfortunately, there are groups that we are unable to work with. It's not possible. They are so far away from the truth and they have moved so far away from the fundamentals of Islam that it's not even Islam anymore. It's a whole new thing. They've moved so far away from the basics that it's almost impossible, unless they change their belief system and move back. But we find in the world today that the Islamic social system is under attack. Our young women and some men, where I live, there's a beauty parlor right where I live. And not a dog parlor, but a beauty parlor. And we find more men inside the beauty parlor than women. And they're having manicures and pedicures and face tintings and eyelashing, volumizing and all this other nonsense. I read the sign the one day and I actually just sat there starting to laugh. There are men having eyelashes put into their eyes to make them longer. This is the world that we're living in. And we find the social system just is going crazy. It's just breaking down. The men spend more time getting ready than the women do. Not that I'm trying to criticize women, but I mean, it used to be that the man would be waiting there going, geez, when's she going to be ready? Now it's the woman waiting there, sure, when is he going to get ready? And so we find that men are becoming more vain and more feminine and more cosmopolitan, as they call it. I don't think that's a very good name to use. We find that our system of education is changing. There's a breakdown in our education system. People are no longer wanting to get the education that they wanted before. The universities are lowering their entrance standards. I remember when we applied to university to do a Bachelor of Arts degree, you had to have like 80%. Now it's down to what, 60% or even 50%? I mean, it's dropped so much. We didn't have the option of entering at a standard grade. You had higher grade level. So we find the educational system is falling apart. We see in adverts all over, you know, one of the beautiful things about going to Saudi Arabia, it was so wonderful when I was in Saudi Arabia. I listened to people with their criticism of Saudi Arabia, but I tell you, go there, just walk around. I mean, it's like a breath of fresh air. Billboards, these are these big billboards all over the place, no pornography on them, no adverts for alcohol, no adverts for all this nonsense, haram stuff that we see everywhere else. There's a university and a technicon right where I live. And opposite it, there is a family planning clinic. What is a family planning clinic? It's just another word for an abortion clinic. There's no planning going on there. It's once you're already pregnant, then you come in there to terminate the pregnancy. You go in there and you say, my husband and I would like to come into your clinic and talk about planned pregnancy. You know what they'll tell you? They say, we don't deal with that. You need to go there. But they've got written outside their door, family planning clinic. And it's right opposite the university. The entrance to the university, opposite it, is the family planning. What are they doing? They're saying to you, get pregnant. When you get pregnant, come over here. We'll terminate it for you. This is the world that we are living in. We are romanticizing the culture of quick living, free sex, drugs, sex, rock and roll, do what you like culture. And you know what? The Muslims are buying into this. And we find ourselves having a breakdown in our social system. We find that we are starting to celebrate Christian festivals. We find Muslims going to Christians and saying, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you. Have a great Easter. You know, enjoy your Halloween and giving out candy enjoying Halloween and doing all these other things. These things are not permissible in Islam. You are not permitted to do that. So how do you do it? Maybe you're a revert and you've just been a Muslim a year, you didn't know it was not permissible to do. You don't say anything about Christmas, you don't say anything about Easter, Halloween, anything like that, because if you do, you are saying to them the following: congratulations for being a pagan. Congratulations for believing in a fake God. Congratulations for congratulating me on the celebration of your dead God. So this is what you are saying when you do that. And would you say that? No, you wouldn't. So it's not permitted for us to do that. Another thing that we often find with a breakdown in Muslim culture and society today is you go to a Muslim's computer. I've seen this with a number of so-called scholars. You go to their computer and they've got a PowerPoint presentation they want to give you. And you put your flash drive into their computer. And as you downloading into their thing, you see a whole section there on the left-hand side on the computer on their front screen. It says movies. And they've got all these haram movies on their computer. They've got these films, vulgar movies, vulgar cultural movies that celebrate, you know, illicit sex. How can you be the imam or a spiritual leader of your community and have stuff like that on your computer? You know, this is just crazy. Craziness. We need to have people that are living the religion. It doesn't mean you're going to be a grumpy old man. I enjoy life and everything that life has given me. I go mountain climbing, I surf, I do abseiling, I fly planes, sail yachts, I go fishing. I do all the fun activities, but they don't entail sitting in front of a third God in the home, because sometimes our first God is ourselves, our second God is our family or our money, the third God is the television, and then only Allah comes along somewhere down the line, if He doesn't break into our television time. We need to change that, my friends. We need to change that, brothers and sisters. We need to clean out our computer. Go to your computer now. Get rid of all that rubbish. Just press Control-Alt-Delete and destroy it all. Select the file and go delete. And when you've deleted it, go to your recycle bin and empty it, so that you can't go back later and say, well, why did I do that? Don't start collecting all these haram things. Your computer doesn't need to be on 24 hours a day. It doesn't need to be torrenting and downloading all the films off the internet. Leave it. Get outside your house. Go for a walk. Go for a hike. This is what Islam is supposed to be all about. Social development, social responsibility. Get together as social beings. Get together a whole group of brothers. There's a wonderful brother in America. He's a revert. They have an idea that they've done. Every day they SMS each other. 10 people have to SMS 10 other people to wake them up for prayer in the morning. That is a social responsibility taken care of. Then they meet together at least once a week and have a breakfast together. They don't talk about religion or anything like that. They just get together as brothers. This is a social development program. Simple things that you can do in your own community. And then they will want to speak about religious things as that community grows. So this is what Islam is all about. It's about social responsibility. It's about social development. And this is where we as Muslims need to put more focus. How are you going to get the kids to be more active? Again, America, I keep using them as an example, but I've traveled all over, but I see the greatest development happening in America. America is going to be the leaders of Islam in the world, because you look at those youngsters, how powerful they are as Muslims. They don't mess around. They're not afraid to tell people they're Muslims. Those Muslims are strong. Little boys and girls, in Ohio, we see them in Ohio, little boys and girls, they're at the mosque before their parents are there. They're in the front row. It's not the old men like we see in society in the rest of the world. They're in the front row, and the kids are in the back. The kids are in the front row. They're there a half an hour, 45 minutes before anyone else even gets to the mosque. And they're standing so beautifully, and they just concentrate and love Islam. Well, that's all the time we have basically for today's program. But let us be serious. Go to your computer, get rid of all that nonsense, and let's start again. So until next time, from me, Areeb Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Subhanallah, walhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Glory be to Allah, all praise to Allah. There is no God but Allah. Allah is great. All power and might belong to Allah, the Most High, the Great. Subhanallah.